Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks, and this will be my Stamina Necromancer DPS guide. Actually, it's pretty much all Cursed's Stamina Necromancer DPS guide. 3 of the 5 parses you'll see at the end are from him, and the majority of the builds shown are from him as well. I can't thank him enough for his help and contribution to this guide. Please go give him a follow over on Twitch and here on YouTube as well for some really good endgame content. If you've watched the Mag Necromancer guide already, you'll be pretty familiar with how this is set up, and notice the rotation is very familiar as well. As always, I'll have some easier options that still perform really well included both in the video and down in the description, so don't fret if the top performing one is a little too much for you at the moment. So Stamcrow is the most desired Stam class right now to bring to raids, and it has been for a while due to the unique major vulnerability debuff it adds through the Colossus ultimate. As of the Markarth DLC, the cooldown on major vulnerability has been taken away, so you'll want as many Necros as it takes to keep that debuff up as close to 100% of the time as possible. The debuff does last 15 seconds now, so the general consensus is about 4 will be needed minimum, but that number will vary based on content. Necromancers are also really good as damage dealers as well, so they aren't just brought in for their debuffs. They have really great class passives that push them right near the top of DPS, even without the major vulnerability considered. So once your group has the rotation for the Colossi worked out, any extra Necros can use damage ults like Ballista and Dawnbreaker, and they are really strong this way too. So what will I be covering in this guide? We'll go through the basics of setting up your character, the attribute points, top races, optimal Mundus Stone, food, and potions. We'll go through the champion points, several gear options, including a few AoE DPS setups, and an option for those who haven't done trials yet. We'll go through several skill bar setups, a few different combat rotations, and finally we'll end with some parses from Cursed and me on the trial dummy, where we show off some of the setups we went over, and then I'll end the video with a really cheesy Vampire Frenzy parse. One last thing before I get started, make sure to give my Twitter page a follow if you haven't already. I keep it up to date with what I'm working on and when I'm going to be doing my live streams on Twitch. All right, let's get into it. First off, we'll go through the basics of setting up your character. Here are the top races to pick from, the attribute points, our Mundus Stone, our top food options, and the potions we'll be using. I highly encourage you to unlock as many passives as possible over the long run, but if you'd like a list of the absolute essential ones for the class, then I'll have it down in the description below. One thing to note that is unique to Necromancers, since they get a health buff in their class passives, they can run the food Lava Foot with a minimal health investment from attribute points. Please check the chart here to see what you'll need for your character to get to the right health threshold. If your sustain is really good and you aren't bash weaving, you might be able to get away with the Bystat, Stam, and health food. If so, you won't need any points into health in your attributes. Now I'll go over the champion points. I'll show a couple of different options here. This first is for a fully optimized raid group. This means that you'll have Minor Breach, Major Breach, Infused Crusher, Alkosh, Tremor Scale, and all of that to fully debuff the enemy's physical resistance. Remember to adjust your CP accordingly for how much penetration you need. If you aren't reaching that 18,200 mark, you'll need to pull some out pretty evenly from your other nodes until you get there. Alright, this next setup is for practicing on the Iron Atronach trial dummy. For the dummy, you need 3212 penetration, as it does not have Tremor Scale applied and uses the base 3010 value for Alkosh's penetration. Again, if you need more or less into piercing, adjust accordingly. And then for the red and the green trees, these are just generic setups. You'll want to adjust these based on your personal preference as well as what content you're running. You can find these listed by class and trial at esou.com. Now we'll go over the gear options. With pretty much any of these setups, you can swap things around and do the Maelstrom Bow, the Master's Bow, Black Rose Prison Dual Wield, Maelstrom Two-Hander, and Master's Dual Wield, and all of them perform really well now, and you can really go with whatever playstyle you enjoy the most and get roughly the same numbers. The following will be the setups that Cursed had the most success with, but as I mentioned, feel free to swap in and out for your preferred playstyle. This first setup is the one that got Cursed the highest damage in his 111k parse. We'll be running a 5-piece Arms of Reliquant on the body. This has the strongest single target dot in the game, and then a 5-piece Berserking Warrior for the jewelry and for the battle axe on our front bar. This set offers more crit chance than any other in the game. Our back bar is the Black Rose Prison Dual Wield. This set adds a lot of tankiness and extra damage as well with a 6% increase to both. 2 axes are the best option if you can. For our monster set, if you're using the class spammable Venom Skull and can sustain and are comfortable with bash weaving every 7 seconds, Markarth is going to offer the highest DPS potential in a trial environment. This is due to the effect increasing in damage in larger parties with more negative effects on the enemy. If you aren't bash weaving, or if you are using the two-handed ability Wrecking Blow as your spammable, Dummy House seems to be the next best option. The ring won't hit on the dummy due to its radius, but just the weapon damage alone makes it a really good option. And it's a great option on fights where targets have large hitboxes, such as the dragons and Sunspire, as the ring will do damage and you'll get the weapon damage bonus. I'd say Selene is a very close third with Wrecking Blow, but if you are using Venom Skull, Selene is going to fall down pretty far due to it only proccing from direct melee damage. For the armor weight, all medium on the gear is the best for damage and sustain, but you can use one heavy piece on your monster set if you'd like a little bit higher health pool to work with. For the traits, all divines on the body, bloodthirsty on the jewels, Nern or precise on the front bar, and both axes infused on the back bar. Generally, you'll go precise if you're using Wrecking Blow, or Nern if you're using Venom Skull, since the Venom Skull will give you 10% more crit chance in execute. For the enchants, all max stamina on the body. For your back bar, a weapon damage enchant and a poison enchant, and then for your front bar, double ravage health poisons are the best option. And then one last note, for fights where Reliquin doesn't seem to work too well, Leviathan or Yondir's Might seem to be your best alternatives. Leviathan provides a ton of extra crit chance and Yondir a ton of weapon damage. Like I mentioned earlier, you could use different arena backbar options with this and also go dual wield on the front bar if you want. This setup in particular seemed to get the best results by a small margin though. Cursed did another DPS test with the more traditional dual wield and bow setup, and the gear is pretty much the same. Just make sure to have Nern in your main hand and Precise in your offhand for your dual wield. And you'll notice I put Selene back into this setup. This is if you are using Rapid Strikes for your spammable. If not, it goes back to the order of Markarth being the best with Doma House being second. And then he also did a Bobo setup. So Bobo doesn't have a great monster set to use, so the Vodashran bow that came in with the Markarth DLC is a great front bar option. Cursed parsed with this setup and found Leviathan and Reliquin to be the best combo, but Zogvin and Yondirs are also solid options as well. For this next setup, with the introduction to the Mythic Ring of the Pale Order, I thought I'd include a solo setup as well. For the monster set, you can do any one piece that fits your needs, penetration, crit, or something like Doma House that gives both stam and mag, or a one-piece Armor of the Trainee works here too if you want a little more health. For the body pieces, we are running Vicious Ophidian if you need the sustain help, since its 5-piece bonus gives a ton of cost reduction and stamina back for kills, or Briarheart if your sustain is fine for slightly more damage and a nice small extra heal. For our second set, Berserking Warrior on the chest, necklace, ring, and battle axe for fights that last a little bit longer, and then Leviathan for short burst fights or fights where your Berserking Warrior stacks might continually drop off. And then for your back bar, any of the options listed previously will work here, and all the enchants and traits are the same as before. Alright, the next setup I'll go over is for those that haven't done trials yet. There are a lot of sets that perform really close to each other, but I tried to put together a setup that would have gear that might still be useful for later as well. For example, Leviathan will be a common gear set in trash setups or Bobo builds, and the New Moon set is popular across the board for both mag and stam, especially in PvP builds. If you have Leviathan jewels and don't want to craft or purchase the New Moon ones, that works too. Just do 3 body pieces of New Moon and it works just the same. For the monster sets, the same ones are recommended here, Doma House, Selene, and Markarth 2 if you're comfortable with batch weaving. For the back bar sets, all of the arena ones still work here as well, but I think Black Rose Prison Dual Wield and the Maelstrom Bow are probably the easiest to get good results with. Remember, you can get these by running normal difficulty now, and the difference between the perfected versions is almost non-existent since they are on your back bar. If you haven't run those yet or haven't had luck with drops, you can just double bar New Moon or whatever other set you chose to run there. Some of the other non-trial alternatives that I thought were good DPS options are Pillar of Nern, Briarheart, Hunding's Rage, Aegis Collar, Armor of Truth, and Zogvin's Warband. All of the weights, traits, and enchants are the same as before. Alright, now we'll go over some AoE setups. This first setup is using a 5-piece Deadwater's Guile. This is a great set for fights with a lot of enemies, as you can get your ultimate back up really fast and cast it much more often. This pairs perfectly with Balorg, as Balorg scales with your ultimate spent. Then we are running any 3-piece that has Minor Slayer and crit chance on it, and our front bar is a Master's 2-hander for the big brawler hits. The Perfected is actually kinda nice on this one, as often you won't have every enemy debuffed all the way, so the extra little pin can come in handy. For our back bar, Maelstrom Bow is preferred, but you can also do Black Rose Prison Dual Wield for the extra mitigation, or even a Maelstrom Inferno Staff to cast the Fiery Rage ultimate. This setup is nice for those not on Colossus duty to get extra ults off, or if you can organize the Colossus users with it, you could get by with less people on Colossus duty and more people using traditional ultimates like Dawnbreaker, Shooting Star, or Fiery Rage. Alright, for our next AoE setup, we focus more on just straight damage and not on building ult quickly. The arena weapons are the same, but for the gear, we are running a 5-piece Leviathan and 5-piece Yondir's Might. Yondir is cool because the bonus actually never goes away as long as it's active on both bars. So once it is built, you can have it set for as long as you need. Then if you want to, you can run in and open with the heavy attack before your ultimate and get a ton of weapon damage while you spam your brawlers, or you can just hang on to the weapon damage bonus too. It's good either way. Again, the Perfected is pretty nice here for Yondir, as the extra pin could help with some enemies that don't get fully debuffed in a trash pack. Alright, this next AoE setup will be for ranged AoE DPS. Sometimes stacking right on the mobs is a little too risky, and it's nice to play it at ranged. Luckily, Acid Spray is a really nice spammable for AoE DPS too, and we can do a Bobo setup for that. We are again using Leviathan and Yondir's Might, and for the monster set, we'll do any 2 pieces with crit chance. And then finally, we'll go over a few more AoE options that Cursed thought were worth mentioning. Azure Blight Reaper is a pretty strong trash set, especially in even semi-tightly stacked trash packs with large enemies and large quantities of enemies, but it can only be used by one person in the group at a time. It seems to be most useful with the Bobo setups. Morag Tong is another useful AoE set if you're using the Bobo setups due to the Acid Spray ability being poison damage, and sometimes if you can't squeeze in Morag Tong on a support, it's best to at least have it going on a DPS. And then finally, the Destruction Staff is a back bar, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, but it is useful as a back bar option sometimes if you want to spam Destro ults with Deadwater's Guile. I did want to note that I think the Vatashran Dual Wield could be a really interesting option for some fights too. Unfortunately, it's bugged and doesn't return stam like it's supposed to, so I haven't been able to properly test it since I can't sustain it in a parse. If this does end up being a thing, you'll just drop your monster set for it, run 2 heavy Berserking Warrior pieces, and run Shrouded Daggers in place of your execute ability. Alright, that's going to be it for the gear. Now we'll go over the skills. As I mentioned earlier, if you're looking for the essential passives to take, I'll have a link to a chart in the description below. This first setup we'll go over is the 2-hand and dual wield setup, and it was used in the 111k parse from Cursed. On our front bar, we're running Barbed Trap, Blighted Blast Bones, Executioner or Reverse Slice, Venom Skull, Detonating Siphon, and the ultimate Flawless Dawnbreaker. And then on our back bar, we're running a Flex Spot, Deadly Cloak, Shadow Silk, Rending Slashes, and Skeletal Archer with the Colossus Ultimate. A few notes about this: Executioner is preferred over Reverse Slice whenever possible. You can drop Shadow Silk for another flex spot and or to make the rotation easier, and you'll see I do this with the couple of parses that I did. If not on Colossus duty, you can drop Colossus on your back bar for a flex ultimate. You can move Trap to your back bar to make room for Camo Hunter on your front bar if Minor Berserk is needed. And if a flex spot is not needed on the back bar, you'll double bar Detonating Siphon. The next setup we'll go over is the dual wield and bow setup. On the front bar, we have Rending Slashes, Blighted Blast Bones, Whirling Blades, Venom Skull, Detonating Siphon, and the Flawless Dawnbreaker Ultimate. And then on the back bar, we have a Flex Spot, Arrow Barrage, Poison Injection, Skeletal Archer, Barbed Trap, and our Colossus or Ballista ult. Arrow Barrage is preferred over Endless Hail, or it will change up the static rotation. Ballista is a great opening ultimate for those not on Colossus duty. And you can move Trap up to replace Rending Slashes for another flex spot on your back bar. You can use Consuming Trap instead of Rending Slashes for a sustain gain and a slight DPS loss. And also, if a flex spot is not needed on your back bar, double bar Detonating Siphon again. Now we'll go through the bow setup. On the front bar, we have Camo Hunter, Blighted Blast Bones, Barbed Trap or Acid Spray. This is kind of a flex spot here. And then Lethal Arrow, Detonating Siphon, and the ultimate Flawless Dawnbreaker. On the back bar, another flex spot, then Endless Hail or Arrow Barrage, Poison Injection, Skeletal Archer, Channeled Acceleration, and then our ultimate, either Colossus or Ballista. Endless Hail is preferred with the Bobo setup, but Arrow Barrage can also be used at a tiny loss. Camo Hunter is great for Minor Berserk in places where the healer can't provide. Channeled Acceleration if you can't get into melee range, otherwise you use Barbed Trap. Ballista is great for burst. Dawnbreaker is great for sustained damage. And if the flex spot is not needed on the back bar, again, we'll be double barring Detonating Siphon. All right, now we'll go through the AoE skill setup. In the front bar, Camo Hunter, Blighted Blast Bones, Skeletal Archer, Brawler or Acid Spray, Detonating Siphon, and then the Dawnbreaker or Colossus Ultimate. And then on our back bar, we have our flex spot, and then whatever AoE dot we're running from the weapon type we're using, Necrotic Potency, another flex spot, Channeled Acceleration, and then our ultimate will be Colossus, Fiery Rage, or Shooting Star. A few notes about this AoE setup. Try to aim between 90 and 100% crit and execute with your Gravelord abilities. Going slightly over is okay. Some other flex options are Razor Caltrops and Agony Totem. It depends on the group needs. You won't need Elude if you're running a dual wield back bar, since Deadly Cloak already gives you evasion. And then Reverse Slice can be slotted, but only if that morph is used on bosses throughout the trial. And then finally, here's some potential flex skills that you might be using, and I'll have all of these charts down in the description below as well. Okay, now we'll go into some rotations. The first one will be the two-hand and dual-wield rotation that Cursed used in the 111k Parse. So his opening is the Archer, bar swap, and then Blast Bones and Trap, bar swap. And then we start our light attack weaving with Deadly Cloak, Shadow Silk, bar swap, Detonating Siphon, Blast Bones, bar swap, Rending Slashes, bar swap. And then our ultimate, whether it be Colossus or Dawnbreaker, and then Blast Bones, and then 2 spammables. In this case, Venom Skull. So now that the opening is done, we'll have our remaining rotation that will repeat throughout the rest of the fight. We'll do Blast Bones, bar swap, Deadly Cloak, Shadow Silk, bar swap, Siphon, Blast Bones, bar swap, Rending Slashes, bar swap, and then a flex spot, and then Blast Bones and 2 flex spots. And so those flex spots could be your Archer, your Barbed Trap, your Ultimate, or your Venom Skull. So pretty much if your Archer or Trap aren't ready to be renewed and your Ultimate is not ready, then you'll just use these 3 flex spots for your spammables. For our Execute, we'll start replacing these following skills with Executioner at these percentages. Venom Skull at 40%, Blast Bones and Shadow Silk at 25%, Rending Slashes at 22%. You'll want to make sure to keep up 1 Gravelord ability for the Dismember passive by maintaining Siphon, preferred method, and or Archer after 15%. If you're using Reverse Slice instead of Executioner, the percentages change a little bit. It'll be Venom Skull dropped at 35%, Blast Bones and Shadow Silk at 15%, and Rending Slashes at 10%. And then if you're using Wrecking Blow, you'll swap that in for all of the Venom Skulls on the chart. We'll drop Wrecking Blow at 32% if we're using Executioner and 25% with Reverse Slice. So while this rotation itself is not too difficult, there is a lot of bar swapping involved. So luckily there is a bit easier version that we put together that gets almost the same DPS. I used this rotation to get 109k DPS on the trial dummy. The only real difference here is we're dropping Shadow Silk out of the rotation completely, and then we'll cast Rending Slashes in its place in the rotation. So because of this, we're not having to go back to our back bar each time to recast Rending Slashes, and it makes it a little bit more straightforward and easy. We will still have to do bar swaps to reapply our Archer, so that is something to keep in mind. Other than that though, the rotation and the percentages that we drop abilities for our Execute are all the same. And then finally for the two-hand and dual wield setup, we have the easiest version, and this is a fully static version, and I got 107k DPS with this one, and I'll also have a video of this version at the end as well. It's pretty much identical to the rotations we had before. The only difference is that we will cast Archer and Trap in those first 2 flex spots every other rotation. So one rotation will have 4 spammables, and the other rotation will have Archer and Trap, and then our Blast Bones and 2 spammables. So it'll just go back and forth, but the rotation will stay the same and you won't have to keep up with any skills dynamically except for your ultimate. It is a little bit lower DPS to do it this way, as you do have some downtime on your Archer and your Trap, but ultimately, if you prefer a static style rotation, this still can get you some pretty good results. Again, all the percentages where you drop abilities for your executes are going to be the same here too. Now we'll go over the bow and the dual wield rotation, and this is the one that was used by Cursed in his 107k DPS parse that we'll also see at the end. So we'll open up with our Archer, bar swap, Blast Bones, and Trap, bar swap, Arrow Barrage, and then we'll start our light attack weaving with Poison Injection, Bar Swap, Detonating Siphon, Blast Bones, Rending Slashes, our ultimate, Blast Bones, and then 2 Venom Skulls. So then after our opening rotation, our remaining rotation will be Blast Bones, Light Attack, Bar Swap. It's important when you're using a bow on your back bar to light attack on your front bar and then bar swap into your volley ability. So then we'll do our Arrow Barrage, Poison Injection, Bar Swap, Detonating Siphon, Blast Bones, Rending Slashes, Flex Spot, Blast Bones, and then 2 more Flex Spots. You probably noticed this does look really similar to the other rotation. We just have some different abilities swapped in, and it does work exactly the same as the other one. So again, if you aren't comfortable keeping up abilities dynamically, you can do the same thing we did in the last one and cast your Archer and Trap every other rotation. And again, you'll have a little downtime on them, but that way you won't have to keep up with them dynamically in these flex spots. For the execute, we'll replace these skills with Whirling Blades at the following percentages. Venom Skull at 30% and Blast Bones at 10%. And again, we'll want to keep up one of those Gravelord abilities for the Dismember passive. If you're using Rapid Strikes, you'll swap that in for Venom Skull in the chart, and you'll drop Rapid Strikes at 20% for Whirling Blades. Alright, this next rotation is the Bobo rotation that Cursed got 98.4k DPS with. We'll open up with our Archer, Bar Swap, Blast Bones, Bar Swap, Endless Hail and Trap, Bar Swap, and then we'll start our light attack weaving with our Detonating Siphon and Blast Bones, Bar Swap, our ultimate, either Ballista or our Colossus, and then Bar Swap, and then we start our Snipe Spam. The remaining rotation after that will be Blast Bones, and then again make sure you light attack before you bar swap into Endless Hail, and then your Archer, and then bar swap back to Detonating Siphon, and then about 9 snipes. You'll see how many you can fit in here with how fast your weaving is, so that could vary slightly. Then you'll just replace one of those snipes with your Trap or Channel Acceleration when that needs to be refreshed, or whenever your ultimate is ready. A few notes about this rotation. Siphon does fall off a little bit, so if you wanted to keep it up dynamically, 3 seconds before it runs out, you could dynamically cast Blast Bones and then 2 skills and then a Siphon for a better Siphon uptime. You can also siphon the Archer corpses too if you want to turn a little bit to get those to keep it up dynamically that way. If you're using the Maelstrom bow, don't cast Poison Injection until about 35%. And then if you're using the Master's Bow, Poison Injection will be added to the abilities to replace Snipe that you'll have to keep up. Alright, that's going to be the end of this guide. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'll let the video play out with 3 rotations from Cursed, one with the 2-hand and dual wield, one with the dual wield and bow, and one with Bobo. And then you'll see me do the easiest version of the 2-hand and dual wield, and then I'll end it off with a cheesy vampire parse to wrap up the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Everybody do the G. Everybody do the G. Everybody do the G. Everybody do the everybody do the G. 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 Yeah, I feel my heartbeat racing. I'm pacing back and forth, trying not to face it. I'm chasing the facts. I just can't relax, cause my mind's on the fast stacks. I'm talking cash. Yeah, I know there's more to this life than the money, but it's funny how the paper make a rainy day sunny and dry it all up like a nose that ain't runny. Been a while since I was 20 and was acting like a dummy. Always had this vision I would be in the neon. It turned me on, so I turned the beat on, and I decided to keep it cool like free on. Now you see my face when you turn the TV on. I'm so special, call me special ed. My life is an adventure like Bill and Ted. So get out your bed, lift up your head, open up your eyes. I'm coming like a sunrise. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. Man, I feel my heartbeat racing. Man, I feel my forehead filling up with sweat. And I bet if I took a second glance, wouldn't leave it up to chance. It's a go get a romance. Married to my music, I hope I never lose it. Give me time and sound to show you how to use it. So crawl up in your minds and open up the blinds. Let the light shine in upon a million lives. Yeah, it's crazy how some people still act. No tag, treating all of their opinions like facts. Just relax, sit back, don't worry about the drama. I love my mama, I want change like Obama. Yeah, I'm a bit strange, I play my own game, doing the same thing. Turn out a bit lame, ain't it just a shame? So many people tame, I'm like a lion long mane, free to roam the plains. You gotta open up your heart. You gotta open up your soul. To be free, you must let go. Don't be afraid to lose control. You gotta close both of your eyes. You gotta open up your mind and see the world in a different light. It's amazing what you'll find. To be free, you must let go. Don't be afraid to lose control. One hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel. One hand on the steering wheel. you.